Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
All right, I want to sneak peek into the crystal ball of Rise 2040. Because from the way I listen to it, I see that, it's not just about a trend forecasting, but it's more of like a strategic framework for decisions that people are going to be making right now. Now, and you talked about trends. So for listeners who have heard about this, who or probably never have heard about this framework, what are the hard trends you consider truly unavoidable for this profession?
Yeah, so just to backtrack a little bit, the RISE 2040 methodology is based on the anticipatory organization framework that Dan Burris has created through his work. And it focuses on hard trends and soft trends. And a hard trend is really based on a future factor or certainty. And that usually falls into three different categories, which is technology, regulation, and demographics. We know that technology is going to continue to evolve. That's not something that we have control over. And we know that regulation is always going to be happening, regardless of where you sit in the world, whether you are in a regulatory environment or deregulatory environment, you have to pass regulation and policy to get there. So we know that regulation is going to continue to evolve. And then as far as demographics, now this can be different depending on where you sit in the world. But typically we have more individuals and professionals exiting the profession, right, from a baby boomer perspective than we do have to fill those positions. So we know there's a talent shortage in terms of number of workers available to enter into the workforce overall, not just in accounting.
Welcome back to another episode of We're Trying to Figure Out. I'm your host Saul, and today I'm going to be bringing in someone who sits right at the intersection of where accounting is going and who is going to take it there. She is a senior manager of emerging professionals initiatives at AICPA and CIMA, one of the most influential professional bodies in the world for accountants and finance professionals. She thinks deeply about talent pipelines, technology adoption, cultural change, and the future of the profession that, let's be honest, is going through a bit of an identity moment right now. So please welcome Lexi Weber. Lexi, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Saul. It's a pleasure to be here and excited to talk about all the things that you just mentioned that the profession is really facing, and it's time for us to make some waves.
Absolutely. Now, for our listeners who are meeting you for the first time, how do you describe your role at AICP and CIMA in one sentence?
In one sentence.
I mean, you can obviously say more than
that. No, I'm just trying to think of like the best way. My role is really creating opportunity for emerging professionals to have the career that they want and understanding how to get there.
All right, perfect. I love that. And you're doing this at a time where there is genuinely a lot to figure out in the profession, which kind of brings me to my next question. When you look at the profession today, right, what's the headline you wish every firm leader should pay attention to?
I think for me, it's just the opportunity. I think this is a great time to be in the profession. Yes, albeit a little stressful, right? Because there is a lot that professionals are navigating today between technology and AI, business model transformation. You're seeing other areas that are being impacted from like workforce skills, how you need to upskill, all of those areas. But I think there's also a lot of opportunity for emerging professionals to have their voice be heard and how they want to shape the future of the profession. And that's actually something that we're doing through our Rise 2040 initiative right now. So, there's just so much opportunity. And I think you can really have the career that you want to have and the flexibility and the ability to really say, this is what I want to work on and this is where I want to specialize. And I don't know if we've had those opportunities as profoundly as we have them now. So I think that's a really exciting time, and we're seeing a lot of optimism from professionals about that future view.
Brilliant, and I want to get into all of that you just said, but first, let's just back up a little bit because I always like to understand the person before we get into the issues. So let's talk about how we got there. You grew up in an accounting family, so what drew you in and what surprised you once you actually got close to the work?
Yeah. So I did grow up in an accounting family. I had a lot of CPAs in my family. And then my mom had her own bookkeeping business. And my dad worked out of town my entire life. He still does. He commutes back and forth between Cleveland and Buffalo.
Right.
So watching the flexibility that the career had entailed for my mom, having her own business, working from home, raising me and my sister during the week. I really saw that you really can have it all in a sense of having a business, having a family, being able to work flexible hours, picking your clients, right, aligning them with your values. So I think I really started to notice it in high school. And that's where I really started to take accounting courses and really understand a little bit more of what my mom did. And I think it just everything clicked for me. The logic behind a debit and credit, the way that we really help people and understanding the importance of the work that we do. So that's really how I got into accounting, was just really my mom was my role model, and I wanted to be like her and have the life she lived. And we're pretty much there. And I still talk to her, and I get to work with her in other capacities now too, which is great.
Absolutely. And so I get it that it was in the DNA from the beginning, and I love that. All right. And you mentioned that your mom is your role model. But I would always, there's always this moment because when you're in high school, you got one thought and then you got many other things that are happening. So was there a specific teacher or mentor moment, maybe with your mom or someone that made you say that, okay, this is actually the lane that I'm going to stick with?
Yeah, I think again, I think back to my high school accounting class, and I think a lot of other professionals can probably resonate with this story. But my teacher in high school, Carol Conchagulian, she was incredible.
Yeah.
And she was a CPA who worked in public accounting, went into finance, had her own practice, and did a lot of freelance work. And then she got into teaching and
Right.
somehow made her way from Long Island, New York to Buffalo. And I was very blessed with the opportunity to be in her class and meet her, and we're still really great friends today. But she was a complete mentor to me, and just really made accounting exciting for the
Yeah.
class, and it was something that I loved. So she was definitely a great mentor, a great teacher, and really made me fall in love with the accounting piece, at least from the technical aspect.
Wow, wow. I mean, these moments they really stick with you. You just never forget. They're part of your core memory. So, thank you for sharing that. Now, you spent 10 years in public accounting,
I
and
did.
so what did that decade of experience teach you about talent and leadership?
Oh my gosh, so much. I truly valued my time in public accounting. I was with Tronconi Segar and Associates, which was a mid-sized firm in Buffalo, and was there for 10 years. Started with them as an intern for a few years with them. And it just felt like home. They had a great culture, and still do to this day. And I really worked my way up from intern to a good staff senior. Really the trajectory between me being a staff to a manager was about 4 years. So they really invested in their professionals, really supported me throughout my career with what my goals are, and provided me with a ton of opportunity. But I think you also have to remember too, as much as the firm can help support you, you have to want to have that in your career and the ability
Yeah.
to really seize that opportunity. So I think we were just a great fit together, and I learned so much about leadership. And I am a very like type A person. I like to have all my ducks in a row. I also felt like, and I'm not wearing burnout as a badge of honor by any means, but like busy season was my Super Bowl because I thrived in like high pressure environments.
Nice.
And I was somebody who could work, like the hours never bothered me. I could work 50 hours a week or I could work close to 80 during deadline times, and it never bothered me. But I learned about a lot about myself as a leader and how my expectations may have reflected on somebody else. And there were good leadership lessons learned, and there were hard leadership lessons learned.
Yeah.
But I think, just really adapting to the idea as a manager that you have to adapt to others' ways of learning and how they process information, and really getting outside of that bubble of yourself helped me grow immensely during my time in public accounting, which really set me up for success in my role at the AICPA.
Nice, nice. And I want to talk about that because 10 years is a long time. You see a lot of cycles, a lot of people come and go. And then you made a move that not everyone on the partner track kind of makes. So, what made you pivot from that partner track path into this association world? And I mean, like, what did you gain from that move?
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, the pivot was not expected at all. It was quite unexpected. I was always on partner track, like even from day one at Tronconi, I told them I want to be a partner. Like this is my life goal. I told you I was a type A person. I had a plan in place. I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my career.
Right.
But as public can provide you, you get a lot of experience in different industries with different clients. And I also got to experience the leadership side of accounting and the
Right.
fact that there's so much to navigate. And
Yeah.
that was something I learned I had more of a passion for, was teaching and creating content and talking about those soft skills, as we like to call it. I like to call it success skills, and how you can really transform as a leader.
Yeah.
And our firm actually worked with Jim Metzler, who was the previous vice president of small firms at AICPA. He's from Buffalo. He actually hired Mark Koziel when he came to the association. So it was just like a fun full circle moment. But he started a leadership academy at our firm, which was really a great investment in professional development for the firm and really providing with everyone with the opportunity to grow and learn these new skills.
Right.
And I started to chair that with him back in 2020, right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And, it was something that I just learned I had a passion for. Like I wanted to be spending more time on that leadership development and professional development piece.
Right.
So I went to AICPA Leadership Academy in 2023. When I was still with Tronconi, and it was a great experience, like a 4-day conference. Only 36 people nationwide get selected for it. And it was just a time of true reflection of, well, what if partner isn't what I still want?
Yeah.
Or is there a different pathway to partner for me?
Yeah.
So I think that was something I really had to sit with. And I honestly had all these ideas of what we could do with the firm. And then probably about a year later, I saw a job posting for the AICPA for my position. And I kind of had this moment of clarity where I was like, maybe this is what I want to do with my career. Like, this is really where my passion lies. I can be doing this full time. It isn't something I'm going to have to be doing on top of my client work. Like, I really can focus my time and energy on that. And I think I just had this moment of clarity of, okay, I can do this. Like, this is something I really want. But in that moment of clarity, there was also a lot of moments of struggle because I was deviating from the path that I set back 10 years ago
Yeah.
and was leaving the home I ever really knew. So I almost kind of consider it the same concept of like when you have to leave home to go to college. Like I stayed in Buffalo my whole career. I
Yeah.
went to university at Buffalo. I never left home. So the idea of leaving home at Tronconi was frightening and, so scary. I didn't tell anybody in my family that I was even interviewing for the position outside of my sister. I was like, I really had to sit with it. for weeks to really understand, is this what I want to be doing? And I think it worked out really well, but making that pivot was very unexpected and very scary for me.
I mean, it's a fascinating path and a fascinating, insight. In fact, when you're a type A person, when you have this particular vision and you're very clear and particular about it, and then when something like this happens, wherein, you have that epiphany that, oh, maybe there's something much larger and I want to contribute to it. Because when you're in that role, you are naturally inclined to try to make things better, try to fix things. And, and when you come across a role that is exactly putting you in that position that I can do that, as much as you want to do it, yes, the fear, it's very much valid. That leap of faith, that
Mhm.
uncertainty for you to sit on it, it's very natural, right? It's very natural. But now you're here. Now you're
Now I'm
here,
here.
and you're actually, doing the things like, that you really are passionate about. So let's get into the big stuff, because, and I want to start off with a segment that I've been waiting for, and I cannot thank you enough, Lexi, for being on this podcast, because I was really waiting for a guest to come and talk about it, and I believe no one could have been more confident for you to talk on it. We are going to be talking about the accounting talent pipeline. All right. And it's something that gets talked about constantly in every conference, in almost every journal, every LinkedIn post, from a managing partner who has just lost maybe a 30-year senior staff member. But I want to go deeper than just talking about it, right? Where does the problem actually start with this, the accounting talent pipeline? Does it start in high school, college, the CPA pathway, or is it like firm culture once people are already in it? Where does this problem really start?
Yeah, I don't know if I would phrase it as a problem, but more of an opportunity. I think there's so much opportunity in accounting, and I think part of what we did with our National Pipeline Advisory Group back in 2023 was really start to identify, well, what are those barriers?
Right.
And, I think there was nothing in there that was surprising, in my opinion, but I think it gave us a format and a structure to really identify and start to have structured conversations around some of these areas.
Right.
So, one thing, that we talked with is that we weren't doing enough outreach at schools. So now we have great programs in place at AICPA, at the state society level, where we're getting into our academic or accounting opportunities, experience programs, and really getting in with high school students and talking to them about opportunities in accounting.
Right.
I laugh because I have a sticker on my computer that Kelly Mann from Audit Minor and a former Leadership Academy grad gave me. And it says, nope, I don't do taxes. Because when you say accountant, that's what everyone just assumes you do is taxes. And it's such a siloed view. So part of what we really talked about with NPEG was we have to get to students earlier, and explain and tell a better story, right?
Yeah.
Not about wearing hours as a badge of honor and burnout, but talk about how we make an impact, how we're helping our
Yes.
clients, how we're helping organizations thrive. If you're in corporate finance or you're a non-for-profit, academia, the research that we're doing, that's really important to move the profession forward. There's just so many different opportunities: personal financial planning, forensics, valuations, mergers and acquisitions, business development. Like, there's so many areas that accountants touch that we don't think about traditionally. And we tend to think about, okay, are you going to go into audit or tax? Right. And that's just the entry level pathway. But what are you going to do after that? And I think that's what we need
Yes.
to tell better stories of the opportunities that present itself within the profession. Because as you think about it, accounting is the common business language, right? Every business, whether
Yes.
you're in fashion or automotive or you want to do something with tech, right? Everything
Absolutely.
has to have an accounting piece behind it for the business to run. So really, there's
Yes.
so many opportunities to match your interests with a firm or an organization, whether that's the clients that you serve or working for Nike or working for Apple or working for Google, right? There's so many different opportunities because every business needs an accountant. So I think we have to tell a better story and help them connect the dots to say, okay, well, I don't have to go in the traditional pathway. I could go right to industry. I could go right into corporate finance. I could go right into consulting. Um, So I think a lot of it is telling a better story, doing it earlier on, right? Because a lot of college students go in freshman, sophomore year already declared with a major. So that's been part of it. We also this year opened up an additional pathway for a
Mhm.
CPA. So now, in addition to the 150 credit hours plus 1 year of experience plus your CPA exams, you can now also do 120 credit hours plus 2 years of experience plus your CPA exams. So
Right.
really the timeline stays the same, but you
Right.
now have the opportunity to choose if you are somebody who resonates better with an academic learning center and really understanding that that's where you learn better, or are you more on, I need to get my hands dirty and get in there and that's how I learn based on experience better, right? That's an opportunity for somebody to really identify what pathway works best for them. We're still working through the mobility piece of it. About 38 states and a couple territories um, have passed legislation as of today that have agreed to adopt the 120 credit pathway
Yeah.
and the 2 years of experience. So again, it's just it's not getting rid of the 150, but it's adding in an alternative pathway. Because we did hear from certain students that it was a barrier to entry into the profession, having that extra 30 credit hours and having to go for an extra year of education. Now, I will say that's to each their own because with any college, you could choose to go to a state college where you might have to pay 10 grand in tuition for the year, or you could choose to go to a private education college and pay, maybe 4, 5, 6 times that. So it really just depends on what experience you want, right? And that's what the additional pathway offers is that you get to choose your experience to that CPA pathway and not having it be a one size fits all.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Wow. Wow. And I really love this, especially when you said that, accounting is the common business language, across all industries. I really love that. I think that's something that we should probably put it on a billboard somewhere. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. And I think, right now, the generation that we are in, a lot of the firm leaders would hear Gen Z expectations and they would like brace themselves. But from what you are describing, it sounds more like clarity because they just want to know what they're signing up for. And
Exactly.
that's nothing could have made it better. I mean, like, thank you for all the initiatives that you're taking. And I pray that this goes into the right direction that we are aiming for. We're going to be talking about that initiative that we talked about, Rise 2040, and we want to also talk about that. But before we go into that, we cannot talk about where the profession is growing without talking about what is reshaping work itself today, and that is artificial intelligence. All right. So you know when I talk about artificial intelligence, it's something that either excites people or terrifies them depending on where they sit. So we let's get into this as honestly as we can. So if I were to ask you, is AI removing the busy work, or is it actually changing what entry level even means for firms?
I think it's both.
Okay.
One thing that I do want to be very clear about is that AI is not taking over jobs. Accounting is
Mm.
still a great, stable environment and profession to be in.
Yes.
I think one thing that we talk a lot about is becoming the human in the lead. And we are
Yes.
going to use AI and different technology platforms to help us create efficiencies in our day-to-day work. So to your point, Saul, of removing some of that busy work, absolutely, right? I think it's how we ethically use AI. How can we ensure that it's a trusted system? It's a closed learning model. We're not just putting client information out into the open, right? There's a lot of standards and ethics and pieces that we have to make sure
Yeah.
that we lay a good foundation of for
Yeah.
entry level accountants and finance professionals to really understand how to use AI effectively and
Right.
appropriately.
Absolutely.
So I totally get the AI anxiety and the AI fear because it's this whole idea of, okay, this is something new.
Yeah.
But I would say technology has finally caught up to the profession and what we need it to do to become more effective and to be really a catalyst to becoming more from compliance focused to becoming more of a strategic advisor and being able to
Yeah.
manipulate data and understand and analyze data to help us provide deeper, more valuable insights for our clients and our organizations that we're working in. So I think it's both, right? It's going to remove some of the busy work that will allow us to fill that capacity void with the work that's exciting, the work that we really want to be doing, that strategic advisory work. And compliance isn't going away, right? It
Yeah.
just might be the amount of time that we have to spend on compliance with certain technologies might reduce itself, but the
Yeah.
quality and the trust of what a CPA does still is going to be there, and it has to be there. That's the
Absolutely.
foundational element of what we do. So quality and trust is still top of mind for every single professional that's trying to implement AI into their workday.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, w- the when technology came into play into businesses, most of the businesses were talent led and technology supported. And now, with the way we are going, I would rather say that the businesses are moving towards, they hope to move towards technology led and talent supported. But at the end of the day, the talent would still continue to be an integral part of it, because without a human in the loop, and accounting as a profession, it's a relationship based profession. It's a profession wherein you got to be very close to your clients. It's very relationship driven. So where I also strongly believe, to your point of view, that it's not going to take away anybody's jobs. Yeah, sure, there's going to be compression in the job roles. Probably the journey of a junior staff to a trusted advisor will probably get shorter if we just implement this right and we do this right. And that could actually be a good thing if just firms are ready for it. But
Yeah,
with
you know, Saul, I think I gotta just say though, I still think it's gonna be a talent-led,
Yeah, it is it is
technology-supported
it is
profession.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
I
think
mean.
it's ever gonna get to a tech-led profession because we have to be the human in the lead. We have to offer
Yeah.
that judgment. And as
Uh-huh.
you mentioned, accounting, as much as it is technical, it's about building relationships. And I think a lot of that is going to be, okay, we're going to use technology to support us and look at the data. And then we're going to use our human judgment and our expertise to analyze, okay, what is the data saying? How do we
Mhm.
use that to our advantage? And how do we communicate that with our clients and with our organizations? And
True.
that's the relationship piece that's so important. And I don't think we talk about enough how accounting is relationship based.
Yes.
It's not just about the numbers, right? It's about how we communicate that numbers, how we instill that trust with our clients and our organizations, and how we move the profession forward through relationships, not the technology that supports it.
Wow. I like that. And you know, when we talk about talent, we cannot talk about talent without talking about skills. So, with everything that's happening in the industry, what skills will matter most for the emerging professionals in the next 2 to 3 years, according to you?
Yeah, so to me, it's really those soft skills. You
Mhm.
know, I like again like to call them success skills because I
Yes.
think it's about that your leadership skills, your resilience, your adaptability to changing environments and transformation.
Right.
You know, we're going to be asking, just like every other generation has had, they're going to be doing something different than the previous generation did, right? Gen Xers really were based on how fast can they tick and tie information because they were using VisiCalc or they were using their 10 keys, right? They didn't have Excel yet in certain platforms.
Yeah.
Where my generation as a millennial, I had Excel, right? So I didn't have to worry about how well could I foot my audit work papers because I could do that through Excel. So I was already accelerating that skill set to be more tech enabled, right?
Yeah.
And now Generation Z is coming in where AI is a big part of the profession and emerging technologies and what we're going to be able to do with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there definitely is the technical piece of it, but I think the underlying foundation is, well, how are you communicating, right? How, especially in a tech-enabled world, how I communicate is very different than how Gen Zers communicate, which is very different than how baby boomers and Gen X communicate, right?
Yeah.
I always tell to people, like, how often do you ever call anybody anymore? Just to check in
Yeah.
and say hello? Or do you send it via a text message? Or do you forget to check in because you're so connected with each other on social media that you don't feel like you have to because you're watching their life happen as it's happening?
Yeah.
So I think that's the one thing, is that we have to be more intentional with our relationships, right? We have to check in on each other more. We have to make sure we're communicating more effectively.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is building that confidence, that resilience, that adaptability, learning how to appropriately and effectively use technology to support your workday. So there's different skill sets that are going to be more enhanced, I would say. But all in all, there is a professional that has to have everything, right? It's just a matter of what is most important for you to learn at different levels within your career, right? In different stages of where you're at.
Really beautiful. Really beautiful. And, you know, uh, you are currently involved in something that takes a 15-year view of our profession, and I want to get into it. It's one of the things that I am also as curious as everybody else who's listening to this podcast. What is Rise 2040 project in plain English, and why should a firm owner who's heads down on client work actually care about it?
Yeah, so Rise 2040 is really an exciting initiative that goes in a long history of strategic planning and views. So
Okay.
really what Rise 2040 is we are asking members of the profession, not just members of AICPA and CIMA, but members of the profession, to let their voices be heard as to what they want to be doing, what they want to create, what they want to experience, and what they want to have by 2040. So every
Right.
15 years, the association, is the AICPA and CIMA, we go through a strategic visioning project. And we look to the future as to what are the skill sets that we need? What are we going to face? What do we
Right.
need to anticipate today for the trends that are happening, for the opportunities that we can create and have within our organizations and our firms that we're not currently thinking of? I think sometimes, especially ever since COVID, in my opinion, people are feeling like they're drinking out of fire hoses, right? There's so much that's coming at them. They're playing catch up. We're not being anticipatory enough as we potentially could be. And I think that's really what Rise 2040 is it's about shaping a future view for the profession by 2040 and really anticipating the skill sets, the trends, and taking advantage of the opportunities that those provide to create a flourishing profession by 2040.
All right, I want to sneak peek into the crystal ball of Rise 2040. Because so from the way I listen to it, like I see that, it's not just about a trend forecasting, but it's more of like a strategic framework for decisions that people are going to are making right now. Now, and you talked about trends. So for listeners who have heard about this, who or probably never have heard about this framework, what are the hard trends you consider truly unavoidable for this profession?
Yeah, so just to backtrack a little bit, the Rise 2040 methodology is based on the anticipatory organization framework that Dan Burris has created through
Okay.
his work. And it focuses on hard trends and soft trends.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Please.
hard
Yeah.
trend is really based on a future factor or certainty. And that
Right.
usually falls into three different categories, which is technology, regulation, and demographics. We know
Nice.
that technology is going to continue to evolve. That's not something that we have control over. And we know that regulation is always going to be happening, regardless of where you sit in the world, whether you are in a regulatory environment or deregulatory environment. You have to pass regulation and policy to get there. So we know that regulation is going to continue to evolve. And then as far as demographics, now this can be different depending on where you sit in the world.
Yeah.
But typically we have more individuals and professionals exiting the profession, right, from a baby boomer perspective than we do have to fill those positions. So we know there's a talent shortage in terms of number of workers available to enter into the workforce overall, not just in accounting. However, we do have the ability to influence who comes into accounting. And going back to our earlier point, Saul, that's based on telling a better story, right? And sharing the impact that we have and being able to influence others to want to come into accounting and finance.
I like that. Hard trends, you can't really negotiate with them, but you can still you can at least decide whether you're going to prepare for them or be caught off guard. So if you fast forward to 2040, right? Let's assume we fast forward ourselves to 2040. What do you hope? Uh, what do you think would change most about how firms operate in 2040? Would it
What
be
I
like,
think most about how
there's no
firms
longer busy
operate.
season, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of bold insights coming through where people are saying, maybe our busy season isn't as busy as we think it will be, right? Can we get down to maybe a 40 to 50-hour busy season, leveraging technology, leveraging how we do our work, right? How
Right.
often we're doing that compliance work. Maybe we're not doing a week of field work in the field with our clients anymore during audit season, but maybe we're doing more quarterly auditing. Maybe we're reassessing and using data to help us from that compliance perspective. I think the idea is the world is our oyster, right? And what we do with that technology, how we change the work that we're doing. Are we collaborating more? Are we becoming more strategic advisors? Personally, I hope that we get out of working in silos from a firm perspective. I think that a lot of, and maybe not so much at the larger firms, but I can definitely say in certain firms, I've heard feedback where it's like, okay, well, this is what the audit team is doing, and this is what the tax team is doing, but we're not talking to each other. We're not looking at our client assistance listing to say, okay, well, what are you asking this client for versus what I'm asking this client for? Is there overlap? Do we just send them one client assistance listing so they don't have to navigate between two different lists, right? I think it's how we interact with our clients. How can we make it easier to do business with firms? And how can we focus on that client relationship management piece and really evolving that in the future compared to probably where a majority of us are sitting today?
Nice. In fact, when you talked about working into silos, I feel that that point itself is going to probably generate some, or probably a lot of listener emails because, I think that's something that a lot of people are facing and, they know it is, they probably just don't know how to solve it. So, but very well said, that's something that needs to be addressed. And, as I shift further from the Rise 2040, the talent shortage, we talked about it, we talked about AI, we talked about Rise to 40. And then there's something very, very controversial, according to me, that's happening in the industry, and that is private equity. Because it's no longer just a fringe conversation, it's a conversation, and I want your lens on it, specifically through the emerging professionals angle. From an emerging professional angle's perspective, what's the biggest cultural risk when a firm takes a private equity investment or goes through a merger?
Yeah, I feel like personally, I think it's just the transparency, right?
Right.
Just private equity aside, if your company is getting absorbed by a different company
Yeah.
or is going to be merging with another company, you want to know, how does that impact my role? How does that impact our culture? And what should I expect? So, I think anytime a business model is going through some sort of transformation, the more clear you can be and the more clarity you can provide to your professionals, especially your younger professionals, I think that just offers some, some clarity for them. It offers some comfortability to know that maybe not everything is going to change. But I think with the communication going left unsaid, a lot of assumptions start to happen. And that's where you start to see that breakdown a little bit. So, private
Yeah.
equity aside, if you are merging with another firm, if you are going to be changing how you do things and bringing in different structures, one, talk about the transparency of how that's going to impact their role. But I think another purpose of it is the why.
Yes.
So why are we doing it? What is the why behind this change? And I think that helps give everybody, especially from an emerging professionals perspective, buy-in as to, okay, this is good. I think that, thinking back to Gen Z, a lot of people give Gen Z rap because they think, well, they don't want to work, they want, less hours, all of these things. I like to tell people that's not the case at all. They are a very hardworking generation. The only thing is they're asking us to explain the why to them. Why are we
Yes.
doing it this way? Why do we have to work this many hours? They need the long-term picture up front versus just the
Yeah.
short-term task. So I think, all in all, anytime you have some sort of transformation or pushback, a lot of the times it's because you haven't explained the why.
Yeah, you haven't communicated well, and that's very critical, I guess. You gotta communicate it well. The whys, explain the what, why it's happening, how, when, everything. You have the clarity in place, and everything will be perfect. And now this connects perfectly to what I want to talk about next, because growth without a bench is like a ticking clock. So there is a wave of retirements coming into our profession. Everybody's talking about a silver tsunami, and in a lot of firms the succession plan is basically like, I hope someone is ready for my firm. So what does real succession planning actually look like beyond title and organizational charts?
Yeah, and I think there's one thing with succession planning, again, from an emerging professional's perspective, that if it's not being said out loud, they're going to
Right.
make assumptions that it's not happening. And I think
Right.
that's where we're currently in a phase of right now with a lot of baby boomers retiring, is that if that succession plan is not being communicated, a lot of the times, a lot of people are saying, well, what is going to happen, right? We know our managing partner is retiring. We know we have 6 partners retiring in the next 5 years. That's a lot of equity that's going out of the firm. What's going to happen? So I think, again, just firms being more transparent with emerging professionals and with their team to say, okay, this is our plan. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but just to give an idea of what is going to be occurring from a succession planning standpoint can take a lot of anxiety out of the office and out of the team's chats, and probably helps with productivity too, because you don't have all these side conversations going on about what is going to happen. But I would say, everyone should give firms the benefit of the doubt. I can promise you they are going through a succession planning process. It's constantly on their radar. So I think, again, just without role or title, it's okay to ask. If you are unsure of what your firm's succession plan is or what their strategic plan is for the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's okay to ask, because I think it shows that you have interest in the success of the firm. It shows that you have interest in having a career with this firm. And I think it can only benefit you. And the worst thing that they can say is, hey, we're not able to share that at this time, but we can make sure we, satisfy and or help alleviate some of your concerns in other ways.
I like it. I like it because so it's kind of like it's a process, not just an announcement. And you gotta update everybody. And the earlier the firms are comfortable with, the more easier it gets. But and I believe the firm leaders are also in that spot wherein they need to acknowledge that they are in the place of being a mentor. So what does great mentoring look like in 2026? Is it just formal programs, on the job sponsorship, or something else entirely?
I think it's everything and all of the above. I think that just as emerging professionals are facing some struggles, and what skill sets do I need to focus on? What technology are we implementing? What is my career path here? They have to keep in mind your mentors have the same thoughts and questions. So I think sometimes it's having those open and honest conversations, whether that's through a formal program. Honestly, I think there's a lot of informal mentorships throughout the profession as well that you can help and lend an ear on and talk through these things with. So, those formal programs, I always say if it's just a check the box, you're not going to get everything out of it that you need. But true mentorship is about having those tough conversations, being honest. It's about having the ability to really talk and work with each other to say, okay, this is how I learned this skill, right? And I even say to people, invite your younger professionals to lunch with your client, even if they're just going to sit and listen in, right? Show them how those conversations happen, how you build that credibility over time. The sponsorship piece of it.
Yeah.
Advocate for yourselves, right? You have to advocate for yourself, but it's also great when you have somebody in your corner. But for emerging professionals, you have to share your career aspirations for somebody to sponsor and advocate for you. So It's all of that. It's really just showing them how to be a professional, especially in this day and age. There's so many complexities to it, especially when you have four generations in the workforce, because you might be working with four different people who have different expectations. I think that's a really important piece of it as well, is just how you're communicating in that perspective. Um, and mentorship can be in all different shapes, forms, sizes. You might have 10 different mentors and get something out of each mentor differently. So I think it's just finding the avenue and the pathway that works best for you. But again, I think teaching that professional how to be a professional, how, even younger generations, when you come in and you think about the breadth of your relationships, right? When you're a student coming off the board, and you're developing a relationship, that means you're texting people all the time. You're friends, you're hanging out, you're doing things together. It's very different in a professional setting. It might be that you are developing a relationship for 5 years before you get something out of that relationship from a business perspective. It might not be it might be more formal communication via email. You might not be texting them. You might not be calling them all the time. But I think we don't do a good enough job of translating the difference between a personal relationship and a professional relationship, and what emerging professionals should really expect out of those relationships from a timeline progression.
All right, perfect. And before we wrap up, there's one more topic, and this is a little bit more personal to you, Lexi. Because you build a real voice online. So was that like intentional from the start, or and like what was and what's your approach?
Yeah, it was not intentional, but I think I just saw the value in networking and community, and it's something that I've always really wanted to reach out to, regardless of where I was in my career or in my life. In high school, I took every single business course, but I also was heavily involved in DECA. I was heavily involved at the collegiate level with Beta Alpha Psi. Like, I always have yearned for community and for making friends, because I am passionate about the profession and passionate about what I do, regardless of it's in the profession, if it's a volunteering event. I'm heavily involved in Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Blood Cancer United. So just finding those areas of passion for me have been so rewarding, but also I love to share them with my community. So I think I just repetitively was like posting on LinkedIn about different things that I was doing, and whether that was going to a Beta Alpha Psi event, or going to an accounting awards dinner, or participating in a volunteering day. I just felt like I wanted to share that with the world, because I believe that people who see good things do good things. The whole be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills mentality of Buffalo. Like, that's just the community that I grew up in.
Right.
I think it was not intentional, but was just kind of an extension of who I was as a person. And then when I took the job at AICPA, and started to build my career here, I think it was about making an impact and sharing all of the opportunities that are available in the profession, and different pathways and different resources available. And sometimes broadcasting what my experiences were with the AICPA Leadership Academy. We're building out a new conference for success skills for emerging leaders. That's going to be in August this year. That's virtual for 2 days, right?
Right.
It's those low touch points of how can I help really integrate that into my community, but also just be known for wanting to support each other as we go through these different career transitions, as we navigate different challenges within the profession. I think it's so important. Just the message is that we're not alone, right? And we have that community. We have Engage 365 on the AICPA platform, for our members to connect with each other in a peer-to-peer environment. So I think there's just so many ways that we can spread community and opportunity. And part of that for me has been sharing on LinkedIn and social media and different avenues. But I think the message is that you're not alone in this profession, and our community is a special one.
Absolutely. And when you share these stories and everything online, I think people. I believe that people connect with the journey rather than the highlight reel or something, and that's something very genuine that you bring on board. And I'm pretty certain like there are others who could be empowered by listening to you, right? And they also want to do that. They want to probably contribute to that little bit to shape the profession. So if there was somebody who was genuinely wanted to start posting, but they kind of feel awkward and they just don't know where to begin, what's your simple starter playbook of what they should start posting?
Yeah, I would just say post something that you're passionate about. I think it's very easy in this day and age, especially with like AI created and generated posts. It's easy to tell what's authentic and what's not. So post something and share something about yourself, but don't worry about the clicks. I think we live in this environment where we're like, oh, how many people are liking on this, or how many people are commenting on this, or what's the impressions on my LinkedIn? I don't
Yeah,
worry about that because to
yeah,
me, it's just getting my story out and my journey out and what I'm doing and sharing that. To me, it's not about how many people liked it or how many people
yeah.
commented on it. It's about sharing the journey, and I think the likes and the comments and everything else and the shares will come as you continue to build your brand. But it has to start from somewhere, and I would just say have the confidence in yourself to share your journey, but don't worry about how it's going to be perceived or who's going to like it and who's going to see it. I think the beauty of it is being authentic and showing up as a vulnerable, authentic leader.
Absolutely. And then I guess at the end of the day, I cannot stress enough, this is something that we all learn from experience, but it's very well true that, you do good unto others and good things will happen to you, right?
Yeah.
It just comes back, karma is real. So, you know, let's move to the last segment and we're going to go fast into this because
Sure.
I'd like to have a rapid fire with you, short answers, first thing that comes to your minds. You ready?
I'm ready for it.
All right. First question. One myth about accounting you want to retire forever.
Ugh, we are more than just bean counters.
I like it. All right. One book, resource, or a project people absolutely should check out right now.
I personally love the activator. It's something that I'm reading right now, and it talks about more of the psychology behind why people do what they do. And I think it helps from a leadership perspective of really understanding that for different people on your team and how you can adapt to that.
All right. If you could give every farm leader one or maybe two or three sentences to carry with them, what would it be?
Um, one or three sentences. I would say don't let your plan dictate the rest of your life and really allow flexibility within your plan and for change. I thought I was going to be somebody who was always on partner track. That was the only plan that I had imaginable in my mind. And it was very hard for me to pivot, but I realized that change is okay and it's okay to deviate from the plan.
Nice. And lastly, best way for our listeners to connect with you.
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also available at emerging professionals at AICPA-CIMA.com. And I'm always happy to connect with members, whether you're an AICPA member or not, and really just connect on where you're at in the profession, where do you want to go, and how do we get you there.
Brilliant, Lexi. This is phenomenal, and this is exactly the kind of conversation that I was hoping for. So thank you so much. Thank you for being so direct, so thoughtful, and honestly, just so candid. All right. This profession needs, in fact, more voices like you. All right. So thank you so much for being there. All right.
Yeah, thanks
Uh,
for having me, Saul, and thanks for this platform. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And to everyone who is listening, if something in today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague, share it with your managing partner, share it with a student who's thinking about accounting. This is the kind of thinking that moves the needle. So do your little bit. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining in for today's episode. Until next time, take care. And as always, keep innovating in everything that you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now